morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
Stepping out quickly owing to the urgency of the times we live in, the Minister of State Petroleum, Tim Silva, the Chairman Presidential Task Force on COVID-19, Boss Mustafa, joins the Group Managing Director Mele Kyari on the inspection of a 190-bed isolation center in Abuja, still under construction. Just last week, the GMD announced an oil and gas industry intervention initiative to combat coronavirus. Initially put at an 11 billion naira intervention and now scaled up to 21 billion, this dome, used severally in the past for big musical gigs, is now to be sacrificed for these desperate times.
Our hope is that we will never need this. If it does come to a situation where we need it, this place will be adequate and available to house 190 patients at any one time.
While that is ongoing, 5 ambulances have been delivered already on this occasion to the SGF as part of the many other items built for the fight.
And on behalf of the oil industry, on behalf of NNPC, I hereby hand over all the ambulances that we've been able to put together. We are still getting more. This is an ongoing effort, as the GMD said, so any other additional contribution that we get will be handed over. And on behalf of the industry, I hand over everything to the chairman of the...
It is better that we get prepared and get over-prepared than not to prepare at all.
Medical consumables, logistics and inpatient support system, and medical infrastructure are the 3 thematic areas of the 21 billion intervention led by the State Oil Corporation, in addition to at least 2 permanent hospitals and a world-class diagnostic center to be built in each of the geopolitical zones in the country. Olu Phillips, Channels Television News.
We have been able to put together a newly furnished block of 4 wards, each one containing 30 beds. We have 60 beds altogether now, new beds, and we have enough personal protective equipment and all what we need, a lot of what we need to start admission of COVID-19 positive patients in Lagos. As you heard, this will still be done through the pyramidal structure of Lagos State. We will be operating under the command of the Lagos State government, because we don't want to be doing anything parallel to the arrangement that's already on ground. It will be to complement what's already going on. So we are very happy with that. We have a squad of 120 staff, all volunteer staff that are ready as warriors to combat this condition in Luth. They've all been trained. We have about 30 doctors, about 30 nurses, we have cleaners, we have drivers, we have security men, we have laboratory scientists, pharmacists, psychiatrists, you name it. It's a team, and they have all willingly come together. They've been training since February, and we are ready to combat this disease. It's been cordoned off. There are various corridors and pathways through which you can circumvent blood. We don't want anybody to go and start getting what they didn't bring to the hospital. It's only fear, as we're using this as a makeshift.
All right, so to give us an update on some of the reports you've just seen and about the industry, as you see there, we've got Mele Kyari, who is the GMD of NNPC. Good morning. Thank you for joining us today. Well, yes, indeed, it is heartwarming to see as many efforts being pulled together as much as possible to ensure that we're able to stand tall and contain the spread of COVID-19. But then, concerning that of the oil industry, could you give us an update? What is the current state of that coordination and then those interventions at the moment?
Thank you very much, Tamberlin. Today, as we speak, we have total donation of commitments, actually, of 21 billion naira to the COVID intervention scheme. As you are aware, this is a very generic problem for the whole world. It's a global challenge. We are not isolated from it. Our country is responding to it adequately. The federal government has set off an intervention task force headed by the central government and federation, in essence, to make sure that everything possible is done to make sure that we get relief from this pandemic's impact. And ultimately, it comes to two thematic areas. One is to provide support for possible patients, and then of course also to, in the long term, to ensure that fewer number of Nigerians are impacted by the pandemic. And the oil industry itself is not isolated from this. We operate in very many locations and terrain everywhere in this country. And of course, our staff in the first line of action are impacted. And secondly, because we are operating in this country, we have a primary responsibility to make sure that we support this country. And that is why the industry came together from all its segments, from the upstream, downstream, and the midstream, to come together and be of help to this country at this very dire moment, which is why we are able to get commitments of to 21 billion naira at this moment to support the three thematic areas. One is to support purchase and procurement of consumables, and second is in-hospital support, which includes ventilators, hospital beds, and so many things that you can do within the hospital. But in the long run, we're also looking at putting structures, permanent structures, medical structures, which can be of use post COVID-19. This is where we are today in terms of fulfilling the commitments. Our partners have started delivering. As a matter of fact, just last Saturday, we were able to take delivery from one of our partners, ITO Limited, of 5 ambulances as part of their commitment. And everybody else is following its own procurement process to make sure that these are put on the table immediately. This will work in the very short term. Within 2 weeks, we'll see most of the commitments will come. Well, of course, in terms of infrastructure-based support, that will take a little while to come. Not definitely available in 2 weeks, but construction work do take time. But we'll all deliver on our commitments. This industry is very determined to be of help to this country as a matter of responsibility. I don't know if these objects clarify where we are.
Well, when you say 21 billion naira commitment, it suggests that. Okay, let me put it this way. Does that mean there is no cash involved that's going to be donated to the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19? Because we understand that's the team that is supposed to be coordinating all of this. Is there any cash involved in this commitment to the PTF?
There's no cash involvement, but we are completely aligned with the expectations and the plans of the federal government intervention team. The team's objective is not necessarily to collect cash from anyone. I'm aware, I'm an insider in this. The whole objective is to deliver on the objectives of the committee's work, which is to provide medical consumables, in-hospital support, and to create a lasting medical infrastructure. The committee itself is not interested in collecting anyone's money. And of course, for the oil industry in particular, it has its own way of doing things and way of governance. Many of our partners will not be able to make cash donations, but they will be able to make use of their established CSR and procurement processes to make sure that this assets are on ground. That's why we opted to follow this route. And of course, as we do this, the overall big picture is provided by the Secretary of Government of the Federation, which is to establish what are the requirements, what are the needs. And our partners and all of us will now key into those requirements and provide the basic communities to
Now, you also talked about the 3 thematic areas, and of course, from what you have also said, it suggests that the NNPC and the oil and gas industry is already looking beyond COVID-19 in the deliverables that they are suggesting. Does this in any way, any of these commitments, is there any of these commitments looking at homegrown solutions to dealing with this pandemic, on its own? Because of course, a number of people have been talking about the possibility of some homegrown solutions, homegrown remedies, and stuff like that. Any plans to support homegrown production, manufacturing of things that can help in this fight?
On a global scale, the immediate challenge with this COVID-19 pandemic is the issue of supporting patients as they come into hospitals. And to manage that crisis, you do need things of today, which is once people come into the hospitals, they do need ventilators, they need medication, they need hospital beds, they need doctors to assist to them, and we also need to have the safety of the medical personnel that are in the hospital. At the first step, this is what you need. But more important than that is that, sustainability is another issue that we require to address. As partners contribute, they will look forward to tomorrow. So what will we do tomorrow? But when it comes to the local component of it, many of the items that I've just mentioned, face masks and medication are actually readily available locally. And our procurement process will recognize that, as a matter of fact, by law, we are required in the industry to make sure that whatever we can procure locally, we must do it locally. Therefore, items that can be procured locally, we will procure locally. But in terms of medical attention, we are not experts in this. We will be guided by whatever directive that the Presidential Task Force gives us, but we will also be properly guided by the Honorable Minister of Health. That said, it doesn't exclude the possibility that you can respond to this COVID through some local medication. Nobody's saying local medicine doesn't work. It does work, and there are a lot of belief and commitments from all over the world that you can have local solutions to this. I agree completely that it is possible to look for local solution to the COVID-19 pandemic in terms of medication. But other than that, when people come into hospital, they will need a bed, they will need ventilators, they will need medication, they will need doctors to attend to them, and ultimately they will also need a roof above their heads. So these are the focus areas that we have, and of course also they need to be transported to the hospital. That is why we are looking at it in a holistic view from end to end, and in line with the list of requirements that the Board Mustafa Committee has provided to us.
Okay, so you did talk a little bit about sustainability, but you also understand you're going to be building, the NNPC will be building some of hospitals in different regions. Is that going to be part of this plan, or that's a standalone project which you hand over to the states? How's that going to function?
No, it's not. We are doing it in 3 levels. One is NNPC's direct intervention, which I will speak to subsequently. But what we have planned to do is in the 6 geopolitical, at least in 2 locations, in each geopolitical zone, in 2 sets in the geopolitical, we will construct fiscal medical facilities. We'll also distribute all the items that we know are required, that are provided by the SGF committee, to all the statistics tests of the Federation. And as we do this, we also recognize that we have a key area of operation, which is in the oil-producing communities and states. As we provide these support services, we will take deliberate efforts to make sure that our partners do support states and local governments or communities within which they operate. So it comes in stages. We'll look at it from a operational perspective. We'll look at it nationally so that every state benefits from this intervention. And thirdly, within the political context of the 6 geopolitical zone, we'll make sure that the fiscal structures are established in all the 6 geopolitical zones.
What is the direct intervention you said? Yeah, what is the direct intervention about?
Yeah, the direct intervention is that we'll construct physical medical facilities. And what I mean is either isolation centers in a temporary sense, or having a permanent structure which will outlive the COVID-19 pandemic. That's what I mean.
Talk to us now about the fuel subsidy, under recovery, whichever adjective you want to use about it now, because many wonder, when the NNPC did say no more fuel subsidy on the recovery, and then, but you will still be regulating, because there are those who thought, okay, so why still regulate if there isn't going to be any more fuel subsidy? So could you shed some light about the rationale behind that decision?
I think regulation is the word that is clearly not put in context in public conversations. When you say regulation, it means there must be a state institution that ensures that ordinary people are not exploited by the market. This happens all over the world, and it is given many names: modulation, regulation, and any name that you call it. But when market forces come to play, the chances are that you can have some outliers who could try to take advantage of a situation like this and exploit the ordinary people. And that's why you need a regulator to create a band of prices within which marketers can play. But what we are putting in place today is a situation where the market forces will take control of the market. We eliminate this, whatever name you call it, whether subsidy or the recovery. The reality today is that people don't pay for what they consume, and also the wrong people consume what others should consume. what I mean is this: the elites of this country, including myself, I'm not exempting myself. When you say fuel subsidies, it's actually about the elites. It's the elites that have 4 to 5 cars in their house. They are the ones who have the SUVs that consume all the PMS that we know. But at the end of it all, it turns into what is called under recovery, which is simply NNPC buys product at market price, comes back to the country and sell it at sub-market price. And once you do this, that cost must be recovered by law. And therefore, that recovery of that cost is what we refer to as under recovery. But where private sector are involved, this is where you have the subsidy scheme that everybody talks about. It's the subsidy scheme that we all know, because of the arbitrage that is involved. That is why you have all the abuses that you have seen historically. That is why all the challenges that NNPC normally faces with the EITI audits over time. And of course, you see many instances where non-remittance of federation revenues for the wrong reason. Because when you say you don't remit proceeds, it simply means that you have made the money and you didn't do it. But in reality, it doesn't happen. It is like smoking cigarette. This country buys products, sell it at market, and then you dispose of it. And you can't see it again. But there's a cost attached to it. And that cost is what would have ordinarily used to build infrastructure, hospitals, education, and all that. All those competitions, all those competing needs that are not addressed are what we use the cost of under recovery to do. And above all, you have a huge economic distortion when people don't pay for what they consume. And that means that you have the cross-border issues, which is because you are selling fuel at a far more lower price than the market price. And therefore, we are practically supplying the whole of West Africa. And anytime we try not to do that, we have the fuel shortages in our country, and it's not sustainable. And of course, ultimately, because of that distortion, states are unable to pay salaries. People are not able to get salary increases whenever they have. The minimum wages are not implemented in many states, and so many other implications of getting this distortion not resolved. Which is why today, with the situation that we have in ground, which the market forces have introduced, which is that today you can actually deliver this fuel to the market at less than 145 naira to the liter. And going with time, you will see gradual adjustment in this price. It can go down, it can go up. But when it does go up, it simply means that consumers will pay for what they consume. But ultimately, the ordinary man, the poor man in the country who is not shielded from this effect is the ultimate beneficiary. Because today, whatever name you call it, exploitation or any name that we put in it, it simply means that this country is subsidizing the elites, not the ordinary people. The ordinary people are the victims, and this has to stop. And this is a decision of all of us that the worst thing to do is to transfer these benefits to the ordinary people. I don't know if this is your concern.
So, has this decision come to stay? Because stakeholders say, look, there hasn't been any meeting for all of them to sign off on this, and so who knows? Maybe until that happens, then they can indeed know that this has come to stay.
There's nothing to sign off. When we decide to allow market to take its effect, it has already happened in many jurisdictions, including our own. As you are aware today, diesel is completely deregulated. DPK is completely deregulated. Aviation fuel is completely deregulated. As a matter of fact, if there should be any subsidy at all in this consumption sector, it should be in diesel, because this is why the masses benefit from. This is what is responsible for movement of food produce that comes from the communities. This is what moves the mega buses that the ordinary people use, and so on. And therefore, the conversation around who should sign off is really a non-issue today, because it's in the best interest of this country that we move forward on this. And of course, engagement will take place. There's no doubt about it. People should know, as we are speaking today, the Honorable Minister of Petroleum, State Petroleum Resources will speak about this later in the day. But what is very critical is that this country should stop subsidizing the elites.
Okay, the question now is it stop for now or stop it totally?
Yeah, but there's no conversation of coming back to this anymore. I don't see any meaning in our coming back to this. The modulation mechanism will come into play such that the regulator, which is the PPPRA, will on continuous basis advise the band of prices that will be realistic for marketers to work, so that the regulator can watch that. But the regulator is not there to control the price, not there to fix price, not there to give a fixed price for a month. No, that's not what happens anywhere else in the world. what people do is to make sure that there's no exploitation of ordinary people. And of course, the market adjusts itself. The process of demand and supply will take care of itself. And ultimately, even when you fix price at the higher rate at your fuel station, for instance, people will not come to you. It happens today. Most people rush to NNPC fuel station for two reasons. One is because the fuel integrity, the pump integrity is real. And secondly, because on many occasions, we do sell below the regular price that others sell. We don't lose money, but we still do that. And that is going to play out. You'll see, as in many jurisdictions, you see a line of filling station selling at different prices within a band, and people will make choices in terms of the quality of service that they deliver, and of course, the comfort that they deliver to these customers. So I see this working for this country. This is the consumption support that we are doing that we should never do. Countries support production and not consumption. As long as you support consumption, you will continue to have issues of balancing of resources, not being able to do the things that you should be doing, and over time, will be of the overall best interest of this country.
Now, we've seen the price of petrol modulated in quotes twice over the past 2 months, from 145 to 125, now 123 naira 50 kobo. Now, that has been quite challenging across board, because when this announcement came for the latest price, you had Ipman in Oyo and Kano saying, well, we're not going to sell at 123 naira 50 kobo because on one hand, we've not sold out our stock. And when the price was changed the first time, there was no compensation. They say they lost a lot of money. And so if you go around filling stations, you see some people still selling for 125. Even some NNPC filling stations we hear sell for 125. So the challenge is how this modulation will work. Because on paper, we say 123 naira 50 kobo, or it might even come lower. But then when you go to the filling stations, what you see is quite different, and it's understandable. So the question is, how are you going to fix this challenge?
Thank you very much. You see, that's the beauty of modulation. It's a band of prices, which means that the PPRA has clarified that it's a band of price between 123.5 to 125. So people can sell at any price within this range. This is what it means. It's a transition. The people are learning how to manage this. Customers are trying to adjust, because as you move from one regime to the other, when you reduce prices, people typically have all stock that they have bought at high prices. And in every jurisdiction, what you do is to allow some form of transition to take you to the real market condition, which is what we're trying to manage. But that is why you can see number of prices in different fuel stations. Some fuel stations can adjust to 153.5 because their procurement is of current value. And also, there are customers who are procured that they cannot recover their costs if they sell below 125. That is why you have that range of prices. But ultimately, when the market forces take full effect, when all marketers, which we have seen coming, marketers have indicated interest to start importing petroleum products at the unregulated price. And once they do that, you will see that that band of price will become the play. We know the market. The PPRA manages the market and observes the market. And that band of prices that the PPRA will advise every month is just an average of the price of the previous month, which makes the bottom of the line for 1 month, and then the top becomes the highest number that was within that period. Once you have that scheme, you will see marketers playing within that scheme. When they go to the market, they will ultimately procure at these prices. They will come to the market. A naira makes a difference. 2 naira makes a difference. So that when you want to dispose with the stock that you have, if you want to make more volume, because this is a volume business now, as long as you are able to reduce prices, you will attract customers, and the customers will come to you. Even with a small margin, you can make your money and walk out. So ultimately, the band keeps moving. It can go down, it can go up, but what it will deliver is a space for competition. And sometimes where people have their excellent procurement processes, they can actually deliver below the band so that they can sell even below the band. And this is what is going to play out ultimately.
Well, the question is, so how would I, as a customer, know, which filling station is still selling old stock, or which one is actually just taking advantage and still selling at an old price, since they know that they might just say, well, it's still old stock we have? How do we tidy that loose end? So do we give 2 days and then say, after 2 days, this comes into effect all across the country? Or how do you ensure that this loose end is tightened, basically?
That is why the band will always be narrow. And of course, as we all know, fuel stations do display their prices at their gates to be the choice of the customer to go to which station he likes. But because the bands will be narrow, the customer who procured his product at a higher rate will definitely still be in a position to recover its cost. And that band is nearly always narrow, probably by plus or minus 3 naira, which is something that can be managed over time. But mind you, this is a transition. As soon as we're able to exit this situation by NNPC becoming the lower supplier of this market, which means that we're just another player, NNPC does not become the sole importer. We probably do 10, 20% of the entire imports. And what that means is that the market will play its course. The changes in the price of petroleum products in the global market will come to play, and customers and suppliers will now have access to this product. And then, of course, the issue of oil and new stock goes away. The issue of oil and new stock comes because NNPC has been the sole supplier of petroleum products in the last 2 years or so, over 2 years of supply. And this stock will vanish because people will have to buy from NNPC. As soon as they start importing on their own, and we've seen this coming now. Once imports comes from the private marketing companies, the issue of oil and new stock doesn't come in. You procure, you recover your costs, you use your best marketing strategy to make sure that even while you procure at high prices, you're able to dispose it. As you are aware, there are fuel stations that sell products at high rates in many jurisdictions. People still go to them because first they trust them because of their marketing strategy, their pumps are accurate, and so many things that marketers can do to attract customers. So getting price is not always the best consideration of a customer when he goes to a fuel station or any retail outlet of any product. And we know that only allowing the market forces to operate will guarantee that and deliver that.
So will anything happen to Petroleum Equalization Fund?
For petroleum equalization, let's get the concept right first. It is to ensure that petroleum products are delivered at the same price across the country. And that's the scheme. But what you also don't want to do today is to have massive distortion within the supply chain in terms of pricing. So this is what government will support in the pricing scheme, such a way that that brand is maintained while the market forces are allowed to take its course. And to be a matter of time before the entire market stabilizes, and then the full effect of the regulation will take place. But that brand of the need for you to maintain that brand to accommodate every segment of our communities is such that that 6 naira or so in the PPRA template, even if you maintain it, it will not be a distortion, it will not amount to any form of subsidy. It is a balancing that every jurisdiction does, and over time, we probably will have seen need to exceed that. But in the short term, it will have no impact on the play of the market forces. Our customers, our suppliers, and the marketing companies do realize and recognize this. But ultimately, it will still boil down to the issue of getting this sorted out in a full commercial sense. As you may be aware, even as we speak today, prior to this modulation framework and the exit from this scheme, at 145, even when customers who are end-to-end suppliers or distributors, customers who have vessels of their own, who can have fuel depots of their own, who have trucks of their own and fuel stations of their own, despite the balancing structure that is being put in place under the PEF scheme, you will see that you will see people in Maiduguri, Kano, selling at 143, 140, but the same customers, and while still recovering the full cost. What it means is that balancing can be managed by the modulation framework.
Okay, we'll come back and talk a little more about that balancing and then raise some other matters in conclusion. So please stay with us. All right, welcome back. Let's get back to the GMD of NNPC. Well, Mr. Kyari, you did talk about what will happen in the short term for the PEF. It has to be there, but is there any time frame? What happens in the long term? Could you give us an idea?
This will be tied to the ongoing efforts to put the petroleum legislation in place, which is in the works. And I believe that as soon as we are done with the petroleum industry bill, we will get past that. But what you also need to appreciate is that, for instance, when you buy a bottle of Coca-Cola in Kano, it will be the same price as you have in Lagos. Nobody is subsidizing Coca-Cola purchase. But even in streets of Lagos, sometimes you can buy Coca-Cola at a higher price than you will buy in a typical shop in Kano. So this is the power of logistics, power of commerce, and ability for people to do large scale and take advantage of situations. So this will take care of itself as it does happen in many countries. But of course, the issue of distance is a key issue that will be compensated by ability for companies to be vertically integrated so that they are operating end to end. And at the end of it, they will deliver service to everyone, irrespective of their location.
So what's going to happen to the monies already budgeted for the under-recoveries in the 2020 fiscal framework?
No deduction for the recovery, but there will be none. As a matter of fact, even the market reality has also thrown off something different, which is that you can actually deliver below the expectations of the 2020 budget, and therefore you will have no recourse to any under recovery, even under normal circumstances.
So if there won't be that deduction, would you be suggesting that it probably goes into, funding, fixing refineries, which has been, a major talk over time? Or do you have a say as to where that money will now be directed to if it's not going to under recoveries anymore?
It will not go to under recovery anymore. It doesn't exist. That funds becomes completely available to the Federation once we were able to adjust the budget expectations in view of the current situation that we're facing. Obviously, those costs will vanish from the Appropriation Act, and once that is done, it becomes available for other sectors of the economy. That's the point I was trying to make. That's the point I was trying to make, that those resources become available for us to fix infrastructure, which Mr. President is very clearly concerned about, put in place our medical facilities, put in place our roads, and so many things that the cost of under recovery, actually has prevented us from doing. There are two segments of it. One is that you see cost that is in the budget of over ₦1 trillion in 1 year, for instance. But beyond that also, there are many things that go wrong because you are supplying more than what you need. You are supplying the whole of West Africa, and therefore the recovery itself is plotted in such a way that you're actually subsidizing the whole of West Africa, and that has to stop. And we see an opportunity in this also. It's not all a bad story in this respect, because when our neighbors rely on us for supply of petroleum, but we can do it at market. But today, because of the arbitrage, it is done in sub-market condition. So we see opportunity for our marketing companies, including NNPC, to take advantage of the opportunity this process to create fuel stations across West Africa. And
I'll just like to... Just a moment, please. I'd like to backtrack a bit, because this has been a long time coming. This conversation of subsidy has been years, decades in the talks. And it begs the question, why has it been so difficult to remove subsidy? Now that it is happening, is it a matter of will or just time and chance? I'd like you to shed some light on that in a few seconds. Why has it been so difficult to remove subsidy in Nigeria?
I think it's the realization that we shouldn't be doing this in the short term, because Mr. President is very clear about his concern for the ordinary people. There's a desire to make sure that value is delivered to this country and to the ordinary people in particular. There's a desire to deliver on infrastructure, medical services, education, and so many things that we're all aware of. He's very passionate about it. But you can't do this if you don't have the right resources. You cannot do this when there's an imbalance of an economic environment that promotes the support for consumption rather than production. And that realization, and because we all trust Mr. President, he will not do anything that will be against the interests of the ordinary people. And because believing that ultimately having the market to take care of consumption is the best way to manage things is the reason why it is the right time to go ahead with this. To say, why couldn't we do over here? I can see that there are several attempts at making sure that people pay for the cost of petroleum. It all fails because there's a trust deficit. The leadership in many of you, so with due respect, most times when people come out to say that this is the right thing to do, people don't trust them. And this is a president that has the trust of majority of us. Yes, there are people who may not like this, but there are a majority of us that trust this president. And we know that this president won't do anything that will against the interests of all of us. But we also know from the market fundamentals that this is the right way to go, that we can have resources to pay the minimum wage and so many things that we're unable to do today because of this discussion that we have in our framework. And doing this is also going to take away a focus on the oil and gas industry as the source of revenue. Once that liberalization is done and then the market forces comes to play, you will see other segments of this country's economy will pick up. As we speak today, everybody is waiting for the end of the month to make sure that there's some remittances coming from NNPC, partner, DPR, FIRS, and so on, to put on the table that so that whether we're able to pay salaries and so on now with this. This distortion will vanish, because one of the fundamental reasons is the over-reliance on the oil revenues as a source of income. And the situation of today has made it almost impossible to do that with crude prices, going below 30. And best of forecast says that, you can do average of 30 in the year, and which means that, we have to look elsewhere. And one of the many ways that we can look elsewhere is to make sure that those issues around under recovery, subsidy, all nature are eliminated. And because we trust this president, I believe that we can move forward with this.
Well, still talking about market forces that you mentioned the other time, tell us about the effect of Forex on pricing. Will the NNPC get Forex as at the same price with other marketers?
Yes, until this situation came up last month, which we decided that will be priced at the market, the cost of FX to NNPC is as a regulated price, which is about 304, 305 naira to the dollar. Today, with this situation now, whatever is the market price of the FX will be guided by it. We will not be segregated. NNPC will just be treated as another trader who is able to access FX in the market. This market can be the Central Bank of Nigeria, and it can be also be the commercial banks. And ultimately, this balancing will completely make sure that it's the market that is playing. So there will be no preferential FX for NNPC under this scheme.
So how solvent is the NNPC, considering the recoveries it suffered in the past? I think the former Minister of Finance did make a lot of noise about how revenue accruing to the country was low as a result of some of these under-recoveries.
No, the under-recovery is cost to the Federation, it's not cost to NNPC. As you are aware, the law provides that NNPC remits its cost, net of its cost to the Federation account. So as long as this scheme remains, it means that the Federation is bearing the brunt. So it's nothing to do with NNPC's balance sheet. We transfer this completely to the Federation.
How is that crude faring in the international market at the moment?
Crude is doing bad, but it's improving. Last week, it went down sub-20 to close to $15 to the barrel. But as we speak this morning, we are at $32.79 to the barrel. So we think that all the engagement that is going on, countries coming back to work, the United States of America and Europe in particular coming back to work will mean that consumption will come back, demand will come back, as we have lost about 6.8 million barrels of demand in March alone. And once this comes back, that market rebalancing will make sure that the prices recovers. And I'm sure you are aware of all the engagement that are going on in the international forum of the producers, of the OPEC and its partners to make sure that some balancing is produced into the market. My belief is that this market will rebound very soon. It will take a while, but definitely it will rebound and it will balance out by the end of the year.
Well, one of our viewers is concerned about the price of kerosene. We understand that obviously a lot of Nigerians have to depend on kerosene. I mean, the ones that can afford cooking gas, they have to depend on kerosene. And this particular user is saying that he wishes to inform you that kerosene is still expensive and they need your helping hand in reducing the price of kerosene. Is there anything you can say to that?
More than that, what we will do, and which the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum, Silva, is championing, and we're all supporting it, is to increase and deepen the penetration of LPG utilization. Many Nigerians are not aware that LPG is cheaper than kerosene, more efficient, more effective, and also cheaper than kerosene in the long term. And that penetration will become like a replacement for kerosene. Kerosene, as you may be aware, it is also aviation fuel. In many instances, they interchange for each other. And because it's a substitute for aviation fuel, that anytime you have shortages of aviation fuel, they go back to recover from the sources of the dual-purpose kerosene. In any name you call it, but they are actually replacement for the other. In terms of pricing, there are many things that affect pricing of kerosene in the market. One of them is the price of product in the international market. And then the ability of customers or traders to import this product into the country. Anytime you have such shortages, then you will now see a spike in the price of dual-purpose kerosene. What we can do is to improve on the supply as a market opportunity. We have a full-fledged trading company that imports the DPK and sells at market, and will immediately go in to improve on the supply side of it, and prices will automatically come down. But more than this, let me re-emphasize that the effort by the Honorable Minister of Petroleum Resources, State Petroleum Resources, Dr. to deepen the LPG penetration is the solution to this in the long term. Most countries don't utilize DPK for cooking. It is the odd thing to do. It's very expensive. It's completely not a substitute for LPG penetration. This is a gas country. We have enormous gas resources. We can make it cheap. Once this penetration exceeds certain threshold, I'm very sure that even the ordinary people will not opt for kerosene as a source of cooking fuel.
Just before the outbreak of the coronavirus disease was an explosion at Buliado in Lagos. And of course, you were also there to see things for yourself. And it begs the question of a number of things, came off from that one, which also begs the question of how impactful or how well enforced are the right-of-way issues all over the nation. In order to be able to avert that kind of recurrence, what's the NNPC doing to ensure that people are as distant from NNPC infrastructure as necessary, going by international standards?
Yes, thank you. Let me recap what happened in the explosion in Lagos. People utilize our right-of-way as a marketing platform. They were using that space that the right-of-way has created to do literally filling of the LPG cans in that location. There are so many of them in that location. A truck came, there was a spark from the train, and because the environment is charged, an explosion happened, and what happened really happened. And it's very unfortunate that it did happen. Two things must take place. Protecting the right-of-way is the responsibility of all of us, particularly our security agents. We are getting maximum help from them, maximum help and support, and also the state government through which this right-of-way pass through. Sometimes you see buildings erected on the right-of-way of the pipelines with all the dangers that it constitutes, but yet sometimes when you get close to this individual, they will tell you that they have a right of occupancy, certificates of occupancy to build those structures. And so we are working on, particularly with the Lagos State government, to eliminate that and take that situation out. And of course, also the maximum cooperation of the Ogun State government and the governor. So once we're able to resolve this, people don't stay close to the right of way, you would have taken first part of the problem. Second part of the challenge is the criminality. Criminality, you have to attack it for what it is, which is that what exactly causing it? Sometimes lack of faith, lack of comfortment with the fact that people must work for their life. But what people do today is that they see opportunity of the pipeline as their share of the national cake. They go to this pipeline, extract fuel, and sell it at some prices that are ridiculous, and ultimately this continuous attack on our pipeline happens. We are doing something to address this, which is regarded by technology itself. We are going to bury these pipes deeper than anyone can reach it, and ultimately it becomes inaccessible to these petty criminals. Because otherwise, once we are able to bury it deep, only people who really can come, and then of course the state can actually, the instrument of the state can address that. Pipelines are the cheapest way of transporting petroleum. We are designed in such a way that no fuel station is further than 400 kilometers from the nearest depot. What that does is that in terms of security of supply, you are able to deliver fuel to the locations that need it very quickly. You are also able to preserve pressure on our roads. As we speak today, there are trucks carrying 60,000 liters, 90,000 liters of petroleum flying our road. With all the regulations, with all the security infrastructure we have in place, this still happens. And what that does is that, as we build roads, these trucks fill this road literally. And not fixing the pipelines means that this will continue to happen. And we are focused on this to make sure that we deliver on this pipeline through some form of private-public partnerships, such that, the burden of financing this and operating this now goes away from the corporation and from Nigeria, from the state, such that, ultimately these facilities become useful in the short term and ultimately preserve the common good. We can avoid getting pipeline fixed. We're looking for partners all over the world. We have gotten clear indication from many. We have engaged extremely to make sure that this comes to play. And once this happens, now you will see this activity spring up. And of course, the petroleum legislation will take care of that. To be an open access facility, to be facility for all. So not everybody will need to put in the pipeline on its own, as is done all over the world. And ultimately, it now becomes the joint ownership, joint property of everybody has a need for it.
Finally, do we expect our local refining capacity to be ramped up to about 100%?
Yes, we are fixing our refineries. There are challenges in terms of how much is it going to cost to do it, who will do it for us. We have addressed these questions. Why we've got to get the financing to do it, we have also addressed that question. And we are very confident that in the next 2 to 3 years, max, that we'll be able to fix these refineries so that they can come to 90% of their installed capacity. In reality, no refinery anywhere operates at 100% of capacity. So it's always a range between 90 and 100. That's our target. But more importantly, there are a number of other initiatives that are already materializing. One of them is to put what we call some form of condensate refineries. We have a number of, so much of condensate resources in the country. It's easier to convert to fuel. The cost of making those plants are cheaper. And therefore, we have a visibility of close to 200,000 barrels of condensate that can be converted to premium motor spirit within a short period of time. We have gotten commitment from one of the partnerships to proceed to an FID within June or maximum in July. And the others are lined up, and we're ultimately going to deliver on this. And we're also supporting the Dangote Refinery Initiative. As we know, it's a private initiative, but we know that ultimately this refinery will become the game changer for the whole of West Africa, not just our country, because it can make as much as 52 million liters of PMS per day, and this is almost very close to our current consumption or evacuation level. And once this comes to play, and as the market forces, it complements this such that people now have visibility of ability to sell their product to the market, which is really why many of the private refinery initiatives didn't come up. There are over 1820 private.
All right, we're just about winding down, but yes, indeed, we do thank you for your time, Mele Kyari, the Group Managing Director of the NNPC. So we'll be back, and some other equally important issues just coming up in a moment. Stay with us.